Let's say, let's say that you've had repeated fights with your wife about how domestic duties are going to be arranged around mealtime. And you believe me, you're going to have those fights. And so what's happening is that mealtimes are unpleasant because there's a war for power going on in the kitchen, right? And so then you think one day, well, you're going to note that, and you're going to do an archaeological investigation and find out just what the hell is going on. And so you start unpacking the fact that mealtimes are not pleasant. And so what's in that little thing that you're unpacking, that package? Well, the entire power dynamic between men and women in the modern world is inside that dispute. And you might find that part of the reason that your wife is upset about the way that mealtimes are arranged is because her grandmother was beat by her grandfather, and that's playing a role in determining her unconscious expectations, and that's pathologizing one of the day-to-day rituals in the house. And if you're going to unpack that, you're going to have to unpack all of that into, you take a little monster and you decompose it and you find out it's a hydra, it's got 50 heads, and then you have to work through every single one of those. It's really, really difficult. And so it's a container that contains everything, but the thing is, if you unpack it successfully, let's say, and you deal with it, you negotiate a consensus, then all of a sudden you get peace, say, around your meal times, which is a major accomplishment, man, because you have to eat 3 times a day, and it's the center of the household and all of that. So, but the thing is that often, when you're, especially in the context of an intimate relationship, things will emerge that produce discontinuities. And the question is, what should your attitude towards that discontinuity be? Well, you can punish the person for manifesting the discontinuity. That's the tyrannical aspect. Or you can let it take the whole thing apart, and that will happen. I mean, that's often how relationships end, is that a discontinuity emerges, and people get into it, and things go sideways so badly that the whole relationship descends into chaos, and people bail out of it. And so it's no wonder that people want to ignore it. And it's also no wonder that they want to tyrannize it. It's like, quit bothering me with that. Well, possibly, but probably not. And also, if my attitude towards you is quit bothering me with that, your attitude towards me when I have the same sort of problem in reverse is going to be exactly the same. And so we're not going to get anywhere with it. All right. But that still is painful. Now, let's go back to the Quidditch issue. Now, here's what happens, is that Harry Potter is picked to be the seeker. So that means he is the seeker. Whatever he represents is the seeker. And he's an interesting character because he's touched by evil, and he's a rule breaker, and he's also kind of a normal kid. He's not a hyper intellect or anything like that. That's Hermione's rule, right? So he's normal but super normal at the same time, and he gets picked to be the seeker. And then you think about what is it he seeks, and he seeks this thing that glimmers, right? It flashes in front of him. It's made out of gold, and it has wings, and if he grabs it, then he wins. And so the question is, what does that represent? Now, it's interesting that when people watch that movie, they actually find that, you know, they think that that's kind of cool, that it's a cool game. And it is a cool game. She laid it out very nicely. And the idea is that, well, there's a game, and if you play it normally, you win the game, but in that game is a metagame, and if you play that properly, then not only do you win, but everybody wins. So and then the next rule is the metagame supersedes the game. And that's the same idea that I'm chasing here with you today about this meta-morality. It's the morality that emerges as a consequence of the analysis of a set of moralities. Or it's the morality to which all other moralities should be subjugated. That's another way of thinking about it. And I said, well, that's a terrible thing because it involves painful sacrifice, or maybe it involves confronting the thing you least want to confront. That's the Jungian dictum, right? If your life isn't all that it should be, then you should find out the thing that you least want to confront that you're avoiding and confront that. And that's easy to say, but it's a terrible thing because it means you're going to have to turn your gaze to the place where you are weakest and most vulnerable. And that is asking a lot of people. So then you might say, well, is there an alternative? And I think there is an alternative. So this is the anomaly, right? This is the ball that contains everything. I think there is an alternative. I think it's associated with this idea. So imagine we could have a conflict if we were in a relationship. We could have a conflict that would blow the relationship apart. All right, so we don't want to have that conflict. And then we could have no conflict whatsoever, which means that you would never get to say what you wanted and I would never get to say what I wanted, because we're either identical, which is just not happening, or we're going to have conflict because you're going to want some things that I don't want and vice versa. So if there's no conflict, we are not in a relationship. All right, so zero conflict is the wrong amount, and conflict that destroys the relationship is the wrong amount. And then you might say, well, okay, what's the optimal amount of conflict? Well, so then we can think about how people respond emotionally. So let's say if you go after the person that you're arguing with and you say, you're a bad person, and you really make that case, you bloody well hammer it home, you remember 50 things they've done that were bad and you lay them out. It's like, I'm going to stomp you, you're a bad person, you really need to change. Okay, well, first of all, you're going to meet tremendous resistance, and that's like you've got the hydrogen, you're bringing the hydrogen bomb to the war, right? And maybe, unless you want to destroy everything, maybe that's not the most logical solution. But then by the same token, everything's all right and we never have any conflict. That's not helpful either, and you're going to get bored of that and you're not going to develop.